Hello, my name is Joseph Carlson, and this is episode 37 of The Grief of Politics. I'm joined once again by Avin Carroll. Avin, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, sir. How are you today?
Good. It's a new year, man. I've
Yeah.
been doing this for 3 years now. So, when this comes out,
Mhm.
3 years. Hey, and we're one of the only people on the internet that are going to talk about Elon Musk. So that'll be new. We'll get a lot. We'll get a lot new. A lot more subscribers. A lot of people are like, who's this young upstart that these two people are talking about?
You
So
know, he's kind of a hidden figure,
that's right.
but he's got a lot of influence and power in the world, and not many people are aware of his existence.
That's
And I
right.
think we should really bring this to light for everyone.
Right. Yeah, you really gotta.
Oh,
We like to point out the hidden gems here on the Grief of
yeah.
Politics.
All joking aside, yeah, he's been in the news a lot,
Yeah.
and we've discussing him several times in previous episodes and privately. And so that's
Yeah,
what we're doing today.
I think just starting out, like these articles I sent you were just more of like an overview, of like the kind of recent stuff. Um, what? Because I never asked your like official stance on Elon Musk, which sounds very, very weird to say it out loud. But like, what do you have you always like kind of looked at him afar and been like, oh yeah, he seems like an okay person, or what? I don't know. I don't know what you.
um, so historically, long term, I've always, I won't say always, because my stance has changed in the last couple of years, but historically, really admired and would have called myself a Musk fanboy.
Hmm.
With what he was doing with Tesla, SpaceX, Starlink,
Hmm.
Neuralink, right? Like
Oh
he's
yeah,
kind of
Neuralink.
and all the popular kind of opinion joking aside, right? He's kind of like the real life uh, Tony Stark without the Iron Man suit, but
Right. Yeah.
billionaire philanthropist playboy,
Yeah.
bleh, bleh, bleh. Billionaire philanthropist playboy.
Right.
Although the playboy part hasn't really as much been his thing over
Um.
the last few years, particularly with everything that went on with Twitter. A lot of my opinion has been marred. Getting to know more deeply how he manages and runs Tesla, I deeply disagree with his management philosophy. And while he's produced amazing results, you got to be someone who wants to work in that environment. And I very much do not want to work in an environment like that.
Yeah, I mean it's anecdotal, but it was reported when he took over Twitter that he sent out like an email very early in the morning saying, do you want to work in a hardcore mode environment or something like that?
Mm,
And
yeah.
I heard it went out very early, like at 1 or 2 in the morning, and to me that seems pretty crazy. Um, you
I
know,
mean, if you're that kind of person, that's going to be the level that you operate at, right?
yeah, I mean, I think lately I'm kind of like you, where I thought too, it's like, wow, sure is doing a lot. And I thought it was good. But like you said, as time's gone on and there's been more reporting about him and he's been in the news more. I mean, that biography came out. I think Walter Isaac is the one who wrote the biography. We may talk about it
Mm.
in one of our articles. Um, it was one of the articles I sent you too that basically his biographer said, hey, buying Twitter is a bad idea. Basically, don't buy Twitter. And he did it anyway. And yeah, I mean the
Well, if you remember, he had talked about it a lot and started the process, but then by the time he started, he was like, "Oh no, I don't want to do this." But he was committed. He had to.
yeah, there's like legal things when you
Right.
publicly say you want to buy a company, and it all has to do with
Well, they
business
started
stuff.
the process and they started due diligence, and I don't know exactly how all of it worked, and I don't remember all the details. But basically, they had started the process, and then he was like, "Oh no, I don't want to do this," and was already committed. Like he was stuck.
Yeah, it is. I think for me, Um, that's the one area I think lately that I've started to lose a lot more respect. Like I do have problems, and I brought up one of the articles about how he has famously been fighting unions in Tesla for a long time.
Hmm.
He's not a fan. He's been at symposiums saying that civil action lawyers and unions are basically dragging the country down.
Hmm.
And I but I think lately with Twitter, with him literally having a bullhorn now. I mean, he owns the bullhorn. Him being able to like a tweet, send a tweet immediately, you know,
Mhm.
has really changed my kind of opinion of him because, even the problems I had with Jack Dorsey back in the day with Twitter, he was a very uh, somewhat private person. I saw some interviews with Jack, but he did really try to stay somewhat out of the fray. I mean, he wasn't always successful, but and I think it's kind of weird, seeing the difference and feeling that, oh yeah, like now I understand why Jack probably didn't get into this a lot, like it just seems like it's a mess when you start doing that, especially when your whole platform, like Elon said, which was free speech. And
Right.
there's been a lot of things that have kind of like attacked that, or at least changed or questioned his, I don't know, seriousness for free speech and stuff like that, So,
Right. And we've talked about it on other podcasts, discussing the Twitter files and the kind of things that were brought up in that, and
yeah.
were they are they genuine, unbiased reporting? Twitter, Matt Taibbi's reporting on that. Is it not? You know, not very long after X was bought or Twitter was bought, before it became X by Elon Musk. Suddenly, like Elon Musk's tweets are hyper promoted and in everyone's feeds.
Yeah.
So it really kind of erodes trust on how neutral
Right.
and how committed to like being fully open, transparent, First Amendment protecting publication. Plus challenges from foreign countries that,
Right.
as I understand it, they've kind of caved to foreign countries that have basically been like, you can't be open here.
Yeah, I mean, different countries have different, different free speech laws. So
Mm-hmm.
what he says is free speech in America doesn't work in Australia, doesn't work in the European Union, stuff like that, and I mean, obviously, the most famous thing I think recently that happened was that symposium where he literally told advertisers to go f themselves. And I don't know if you
Right.
saw that clip that was pretty much went viral. And I think what was interesting was the interviewer um, just let him speak, which usually the person would interrupt or try to, you know, interpret what he's saying and say, so basically what you're trying to say right now is this, but you really mean, X instead of Y. And he just kept talking, and the person just let him speak, which I think was pretty interesting. It was a
I
pretty
mean, let him
crazy.
hang himself, right?
Yeah, I mean, it was, when he
So
said,
we're recording this Saturday, January 13th of 2024, and we just had the last Republican national debate, and Donald Trump had his competing event on Fox News. And, the Fox News contributors kind of let Trump hang himself, right? Like they didn't push back. They were just like, yeah, let's let him talk. And he
yeah,
definitely put his foot in his mouth because there are some things that he said that are going to really haunt him in the upcoming election.
yeah, I mean, with Elon, apparently there's been some reports come out that, from credit agencies, I think,
Mm.
Moody's and things like that, that Twitter's lost like 71% of its value since he's bought it. Um,
One of the articles that we had here. Um, Oh, it's the one that actually was interview, or kind of breaking down a podcast interview with Walter Isaacson, who published the biography
oh,
or
yeah.
wrote the biography, didn't publish it. There was a quote from there. In the span from 2022 when he bought it to when they did the podcast in 2023, Twitter had gone from a valuation of 44 billion to 19 billion.
Yeah. Yeah, that's.
Like, oof. But at the end of the day, I don't know that Musk actually cares. I mean, part of me has wondered if it's his intention to uh, destroy it anyway.
Right. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think he would have. I think he would have went either way with it. You know what I mean? Like, if it would have been a money making thing, he would have leaned into that. I mean, right now, the amount of ads I get on Twitter, and also, they have two tabs. One of like, hey, if you like this, you should like this, and that's a whole tab to itself. It's like if you like video game stuff, here's a bunch of other video game journalists or articles on video games. that's fine.
Mhm.
But a lot of those people I don't follow, so I'm like, I don't, you follow people that you want to hear their opinion and stuff like that. So if you go to the following tab, who you're following, that keeps a timeline of people that obviously you are following and that are updating stuff. Well, I'm starting to get weird people that I'm like, I've never followed this person. I don't know who this is, but they're
Right.
getting fed to my algorithm. And I brought up with you, when we did our last episode about Israel and Palestine. Never in my life have I looked up any Israeli government organization on Twitter, but now their official news
Right.
thing is being sent to my Twitter account. And I'm like, what? Like, I've never asked for this. Even before the conflict started, I never looked anything up. It's just really odd to me that this,
Although now you are reading articles about it and actively discussing it.
that's
Now we
it.
get into the hypothesis that your phone is listening to you
I mean, maybe. I mean,
and sharing that information with companies like Twitter and Google and Facebook.
well, I mean, I don't know if you've noticed this. Like, I listen to a lot of podcasts, and like when I was in out of town working, like in Montana, I would be sent like before the podcast would break for ads. When I was in Montana, if I download an ad or a podcast, I would get ads from Montana, from like the Black Creek area, and I'm like, why? Because I'd be back in Washington, like, why am I getting an ad for this Black Creek thing? Oh yeah, because I downloaded it in Montana, so it's just feeding. Anyway, I think the
Yeah.
reason why I want to talk about Elon on the Grief of Politics is because his technology is affecting people. Like, yes, it is a long article that I sent you about Starlink, but the fact that um,
It's not just about Starlink. It's really about the overarching impact of Musk and his companies on
yeah, and
governments, global economy,
right,
uh, all over, right? And it talks specifically about Starlink, but it
yeah,
also talks about Tesla and its impacts,
right, yeah,
SpaceX,
right. Well,
and how it impacts.
it basically it's from the New Yorker. It's called Elon Musk's Shadow Rule: How the U.S. Government Came to Rely on the Tech Billionaire and is Now Struggling to Rein Him In. It's by Ronan Farrow, Mia Farrow's son. It came out August 21st, 2023. The first thing I wanted to read was just a pull quote right below the photo. It says, "We are living off his good graces," a Pentagon official said of Musk's role in the war in Ukraine. That sucks.
Mm.
So basically, an undersecretary for policy at the Pentagon, Colin Call, he basically had to call Musk and talk about Starlink. How do we want to use Starlink? Um, It says right here on the second paragraph, the reason soon became apparent. Even though Musk is not technically a diplomat or a statesman, I felt it was important to treat him as such, given the influence he has on this issue. Call told me SpaceX, Musk's space exploration company, had for months been providing internet access across Ukraine, allowing the country's forces to plan attacks and to defend themselves. But in recent days, the forces had found their connectivity severed as they entered territory contested by Russia. More alarmingly, SpaceX had recently given the Pentagon an ultimatum. If it didn't assume the cost of providing services in Ukraine, which the company calculated at some $400 million annually, it would cut off access. And we started to panic. The senior officials uh, uh, could turn into they were alarmed that Musk could turn it off at any moment, and that would have real
Mm-hmm.
operational impact for Ukraine. And so that's the
Right.
thing, like in the U.S., when we think of foreign policy, yes, we could talk about budgets, we could talk about the military-industrial complex, we could talk about all this, but all that kind of stuff in the package parade is settled. It's going to take this much money, and these things will be paid for. When you rely on Musk, he could say, "I'm turning it off. You didn't. You need to cut me a check." So there's like this
Yep.
weird. I'm not going to say blackmail, but he basically can hold the purse strings and the service. He can turn it on and off. So to me, that's
Right.
pretty. That is in a weird situation where, whatever you think about the conflict in Ukraine and Russia between the two, a third party non state actor can just say, "No, we're done." That is
Mm-hmm.
kind of alarming, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And um, I had it written down here later. It's let's see if I could have the basically some of the commanders in Ukraine were like, we got cut off in the middle of operations. So like we were pushing towards the front line and we had no
Right.
communications. And you're
Right.
just
The
like,
interview was with like a signals commander talking about keeping signals up and active on the front line, and then they crossed the border into Russia on an offensive push and suddenly lost all their comms and had to stop and come back. And
right.
there was a lot of frenzied communication between Ukrainian officials and American officials trying to get it taken care of.
And it says right here,
Right.
like,
So the
oh, sorry, I just want to read this really quick. This is still talking about that same phone call. After a 15-minute call, Musk agreed to give the Pentagon more time. He also, after public blowback and with evident annoyance, walked back his threats to cut off service. The hell with it, he tweeted. Even though Starlink is still losing money and other companies are still getting billions of taxpayer dollars, we will still
yeah.
keep funding Ukraine government for free. This June, the Department of Defense announced that it had reached a deal with Musk. So I imagine they reached a deal for some funds, is what I would say.
Oh, yeah. Well, and one of the other things that they highlight as you go down the discussion, and that's just the first part of this article, right? It digs deeper as you keep going on, talking about SpaceX and its impact and some of the other things. And when they talked about that particular part of it, the Department of Defense suddenly realized, like, we don't have any contractual protection of this, right? Like, they can just pull the rug out from under us because no one had bothered to think, like, oh yeah, this is a private company. We should write a
Right.
contract and figure out some sort of like agreement and penalties and all the other stuff that goes into a purchase contract.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it was a super difficult one to negotiate. And one
Yeah.
of the other things it highlights in that phone call, I believe it was Khan that had said it. Maybe hang on, let me check my notes here. Um, Call, I believe it was Call that had talked about like in the conversation, or maybe it was Pharaoh recognizing that like Musk was kind of struggling with the fact that he also didn't really want his technologies to be used as
Oh,
wartime tools. So he was kind of
yeah.
struggling with the morality of it. They also talk about like Musk admitted in that 15-minute phone call with the state official, which I believe was Call, that he had talked to the Putin
Yeah.
directly.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's weird, like for
He's
that.
not a diplomat; he's a private business owner, and
Yeah,
so like
and just
he
think,
can he can talk to whoever he wants.
yeah, and just think of that. If you're Putin and you're hearing all this, and all of a sudden, a private businessman is basically allowing communications with your enemy, then
Right.
you're gonna make a phone call and say, hey, what can we do? Then that creates a weird logistical thing because if we decided to back Ukraine, then we're diplomatically, we may talk to Russia, but we're not gonna go, oh yeah, you can also listen into their phone, and then what's happening on the back end, it raised a lot of
And
questions.
Musk had come out and had tweeted like his solution for the war, and he supported that. Russia really wants the war to end. They really want peace, right? So Putin was able to make his case. They're like, no, 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 no. Like I don't. I I'm willing to make peace. We'll just redraw the borders. And so that was Musk's idea. So we have no idea what that conversation was.
Yeah,
We have no notes on what that conversation was.
yeah.
Musk has walked back that he's had conversations with the Kremlin, but they say that other people around him said that he'd had multiple talks with the Kremlin.
Yeah, and like in our, in an official capacity, there would be probably news agencies there with the diplomat, or not in the negotiations, but they would come back and report, hey, what happened, or they'd have a press conference, or you'd get a leak from somebody going, hey, I'm concerned with this, leak it out to the press. This is total lockdown, so there's little to no transparency. And I think
So I will say this about this particular article. I did not finish it because I wanted to be able to finish the other articles
oh,
and
it's
the other
huge.
content you sent.
It's huge.
Um, so it's a very long article, but I would recommend it. Anyone that's listening to this that's interested in it, like I would totally look up the article. Again, Joe gave the title on it. It was published on the 21st of August in 23, written by Ronan Farrow in the New Yorker. But it really does a good job of kind of outlining all of the various areas that Musk's companies have an impact on the country. And as they're talking about just Starlink specifically and its impact in the Ukraine war and what's going on there and the struggles that that had and kind of where Musk is at in it, it also talks about how the use of Starlink and the press around that has also concerned China and how China is now worried and has asked Musk not to deploy this technology within their borders.
Right.
which they haven't done, and like how China treats Musk kind of like a foreign dignitary. They're basically trying to influence him to not do these things. They're trying to influence him on Taiwan, and he's openly talked about like, oh well, maybe we should be like a dual government kind of a scenario, and he's been more supportive of China on that side of it. So like he could be influenced in those regards. One of the things in this article, as you go down further, that was really interesting to me too, though, is like the U.S. government is kind of pushing EVs and uh, charging networks, and they've been holding back on and haven't really been pushing Tesla very hard on making their charging stations universal because Tesla has such a huge network compared to anybody else in any
Right.
other system out there.
Right.
But they've offered, I guess, billions in subsidies and or like tax benefits to Tesla to make all of their stations compatible. So like it has a big impact on transportation in the United
Right.
States.
Right.
And one of the most impactful things is SpaceX.
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
NASA flights right now, or not all NASA flights, but all like human flights with NASA are all being carried by SpaceX. Now that's not going to be long
Oh,
term.
for their
NASA's
you mean on the launch pad or whatever? Like their facilities?
no, like SpaceX is carrying the cargo on their
Oh.
rockets
Mm.
and carrying people, right? Because they did the whole Dragon Pod thing and what's going on with that to the space station.
Mm. Mm.
Um, so, SpaceX is in a really high level of power and it's 100% private. It's not even publicly traded.
Yeah.
So it's not like the government can be like, oh, well, send the SEC after it.
Yeah, because even if NASA, if I disagree with NASA's doing, there may be an audit, right? Or an investigation. Or like, now it's like, well, I mean, there could be, but it's harder now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's a private citizen. So the
And so
oh, go ahead.
it was really interesting to me reading through that particular article, like all the way down. I did not read the whole article. I read about half of it. But, as you go through and realize, like, just how much of an impact Musk's companies have on the way the world operates, specifically for us here in the United States, how much it operates, but it has global implications.
Right.
Um, so there was a quote in here from Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI,
Right.
that I thought was pretty interesting. And Sam said, at some event, I believe, I don't remember exactly when it was, but the quote from Sam Altman was, Musk desperately wants the world to be saved, but only if he can be the one to save it,
Right. That
which
is
is kind
definitely
of insightful.
yeah. Yeah, like I want to be the one holding, the cards basically for everything. So,
Hmm.
um yeah, I mean, the other thing I'll say, and this is I don't know the order of this or like what we're going to talk about, but like maybe we could go to the Guardian article about unions, which I thought was interesting, where like the person who wrote the article from the Guardian, it's an opinion piece.
Hmm.
Let's see here.
German Bender.
Yeah, which I thought was like I was like I'm not reading that name right, am I? Yeah, it's an opinion piece
Right.
from the Guardian. It was written by German Bender. It came out on Wednesday, the 10th of January, 2024. So it's a new article.
Hmm.
Basically reading over this and everything, it basically said that like there is specific agreements with businesses and employers that don't even have to do with the government, that just have to do with those companies and like the individual like groups of labor basically. And they even said that government kind of takes a hands-off approach because they're like, no, you guys have reached
Hmm.
an agreement, you need to fulfill that agreement, stuff like that. And
So on that note, I actually took a note on that specifically, um, and what I'd written down was Sweden doesn't have very strong labor laws. Sweden's labor laws are actually pretty lenient and not very broad, was my interpretation of it, because 90% of workers are under some form of collective bargaining agreement in Sweden.
right.
And I guess Sweden, one of the other like bullet points I took was Sweden's how did he put it? Sweden is a trade union stronghold and has been for over 100 years. Um, and so, because it's such a deep ingrained part of their culture, government hasn't had to have strong labor laws. And so, German's argument here was that Musk doesn't understand that because of the way Sweden operates, it's actually in his benefit to work more closely with the unions because that keeps the government out of regulating what they can and can't do.
Right. Yeah.
And most businesses in Sweden really, really benefit from having a good relationship with their unions because it means that the government doesn't have to intercede with laws. So there's no minimum wage laws. There's a lot of other protections that aren't written into their laws that we have in the United States because the unions haven't been broken up.
Yeah, and also they basically said that there's solidarity in unions because
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of solidarity because they know if one trade looked the other way, then other people could start looking the other way, and they wouldn't be enforced. So that's why
Right.
metal stopped getting. Let's see, I'm trying to see here. Um, um, Electrical
So I
workers.
wrote down a whole bunch of bullets on that too, and the other unions that have stepped in to back. So it's the union that is impacting
There's
um,
IF metal.
is IF Metal that is asking for better benefits and pay for their mechanics at the Tesla facilities,
Mhm.
and other unions have stepped in solidarity to
Right.
IF Metal's strike. And apparently, strikes in Sweden are super, super uncommon because businesses usually work with their unions because they don't want the government to get involved.
Yeah.
And so the electrical workers union is not doing maintenance of buildings and they're
Yep.
not repairing charging stations. The postal workers union isn't delivering mail to the Tesla facilities.
Or light.
Transportation unions aren't transporting equipment, and I think that's where the metal part of it was coming in. Is the transportation unions aren't transporting waste disposal for the repair shops.
Yep. So
Um,
they're not cleaning the repair shops.
yeah, building maintenance union isn't doing cleaning for the repair shops and offices, which right in the United States that's not allowed. Unions can't do that. In I guess this article,
Unless,
Guardian's a British publication. They don't do it in the UK either.
yeah. Um, I just think it's actually kind of fascinating where, I think this person has a pretty valid point. Like, hey, instead of you just stonewalling these people, look how this has always worked. You're in another country. You're
Right.
dealing with, literally a foreign system set up. So, yeah, maybe you should sit down and work with these people and, come to some kind of agreement. Um, and then,
Let's see here. He actually said something along those lines. Musk should consider the idiosyncrasy of the Nordic countries with the same interest that he studies car batteries or rocket designs. He would then realize that these economies have managed to be not only socially inclusive and egalitarian, but flexible, innovative, and internationally competitive. And he brought this up because Musk has always had a pretty strong anti union philosophy.
right, yeah. And it says right here, in the past 30 years, Sweden has had approximately 60% real wage growth for workers on all income levels and remains among the
Right.
world's least unequal countries. Meanwhile, the country consistently ranks among the world's most innovative, competitive, and economically free nations, scoring higher than the US and the UK in most measures.
Mm-hmm.
And to be clear, this does not come with the cost. This does not come with the cost of labor unrest. In fact, strikes are exceedingly rare, like you mentioned before. It's one of
Mm-hmm.
the most peaceful in Europe. The Tesla strike is an exception.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, what he's saying is, hey, they have something that works really well. Just work with them. Don't try to push against them because this
Right.
has already snowballed and it's just going to get worse. And
I think one of the bigger takeaway or lessons from this in general, right, and this isn't what the author's getting at, although maybe it is that, right, like Musk should recognize, like you're working in a foreign country, recognize that country's customs, and you'll have better success.
right.
I don't remember which article it was in, but one of the most important things that I recognized in reading through the article, let me see if I can find it here. Um, it's the article about is Elon Musk anti-Semitic that we sent you.
Yes, the Jerusalem Post
Um,
article. Yes.
that's from the Jerusalem Post. It came out on 11/29 of 23. I'm going to butcher the last person's name. First name is Udi or Udi Etzion
Yeah.
Walla. I apologize for butchering that. If someone else knows how to say it, please correct me.
Well, there is
But
there is an exclamation point here, which I don't know. I don't know. I mean, yeah. Anyway, go ahead.
maybe that was a voila.
Yeah, I don't.
I typed it out.
Yeah, I'm
Who
not
knows?
sure. I have no. Yeah.
Anyway, the point was that Elon Musk
Well, I mean, lately he did like that tweet about anti-Semitism that the
Maybe it wasn't in this article, but somewhere in one of these articles it discussed that Elon Musk is really uncomfortable with people.
oh yeah,
Maybe it was even his biographer, but they talked about Elon Musk being diagnosed with Asperger's at one point when he was younger.
that might have been the biography article. Yeah.
Nowadays we've changed it. Now it's just he's on the spectrum.
Right.
But I think that's a really, really important point for people that are criticizing Musk to recognize. Like, here we have someone who has a diagnosed uh, autism spectrum disorder
Right.
situation, right? And specifically around understanding social cues, understanding social situations, and how to navigate and what to do with those. And so I think it is important that people take that in mind, right?
Yeah.
It is amazing that someone with that diagnosis, and I think it should be celebrated, has been able to do the amazing things that Musk has accomplished. However, right, we default to this sort of judgment that he's a tyrant of a boss, which 100% makes sense when you recognize that he's on the spectrum
Right.
because he gets hyper focused and narrow and doesn't understand why other people don't want to work the way that he wants to work and doesn't understand why people push back.
Right.
Assuming this diagnosis is accurate, he's going to have a super hard time understanding like why do you guys want unions? Why do you operate that way? That doesn't make sense. Like, you shouldn't do that. This is the right way to do it. My way is the right way to do it. And
Yeah.
so one of the other quotes that they had of him was him basically saying something along the lines of, I'm ad-libbing to a degree, but I'm going to try to stay as close as I can. It was basically, I run the human operating or human interface very efficiently, or something along those lines.
Well,
But it's not a horrible statement for him either, because he's recognizing that, like, I don't operate like regular people. And it might have been one of his ex-wives talking about him in one of the articles, because
I know the Ronan Farrow one. I think his first wife said, his propensity to run companies and his attitude didn't turn off when he got home, basically. So it like
right,
the
he had to be
egotistical.
in
Yeah, he
control.
had to be in control. Even at their wedding, he said, "I'm the alpha," and she was like, "Whoa, like this is not." You know what I mean? That's not
Right,
really how marriage. Maybe it does
right.
for some people, but
And the disadvantage to that singular focus is we run into this kind of behavior that he has, where he has this singular focus. He thinks he knows the right answer, and he's going to charge ahead with it with utter disregard for what anyone else thinks,
yeah,
because he has this focus and he has this idea, and it has paid off. He's been greatly successful because he doesn't listen to haters or anyone else. He just runs straight through. Uh, as I say that, I envision the juggernaut charging through walls and not caring.
pretty much. Yeah, he does do that. Yeah,
But there's prices to pay that too, right? Because he doesn't fit into the social narrative.
right.
So we have a lot of people. Is he anti-Semitic? He said these things. He's liked these tweets.
Yeah, I mean, the Jerusalem Post one I like because it basically is kind of a rough timeline of all the times he's kind of agreed with kind of like anti-Semitic things, or
There's only a couple that they really highlight there, but then they also highlight that he brought people back onto Twitter that were kind of anti-Semitic, and there's some other stuff. I actually took notes because they highlighted some tweets that he liked, but didn't actually post those tweets. But then they posted other tweets. So I'm like, where's the evidence on this, or were those taken down? Like, what's going on? You don't actually highlight what was said in those tweets. You just sort
right.
of mention them. Uh, I don't know. That one's a little bit more difficult for me to understand, right? Like, even the tweets that they highlight, like, I'm reading those and I'm like, okay, I don't have context here. Like, is he liked a tweet or agreed, right? Like, nothing but facts or something was one of the ones that he said on it. And let me
Well,
actually
the
pull it
one
up so I
that
can speak to it.
the one that I mean, the big one, the new one that happened, the newest one was the one that came out like at November 15th, 2023 by the artist formerly known as Eric. I'm looking at the screen grab here.
Right,
The
right.
the
Yeah.
guy, yeah, the guy said, "Okay, Jewish communities have been pushing the exact kind of dialectic hatred against whites that they claim to want people to stop using against them. I'm deeply disinterested in giving the tiniest shit now about Western Jewish populations coming to the disturbing blah blah blah, and then
it gets cut off. So, and it's replying to CWBOCA, which I don't even know what that is.
yeah,
And so I read this and I'm like, I I don't I don't know the context. I don't understand this. So when they say when Musk tweets back and they're calling this anti-Semitic or hinting at anti-Semitism, you have said the actual truth. I don't know what was said.
well, it's right here. They screen grab what the guy said. I just read the quote of what he said.
Correct, but half of it, and I don't know what he's responding to. So like, what is he? What is he saying that the Jewish community is saying? Like, I
He's
don't get it. So I have to take their word for it. This is Jerusalem Post, so I am definitely going to assume that
yeah,
what the artist formerly known as Eric had said would be something
problematic.
attacking Jewish communities.
Yeah,
Yeah, we could say problematic. We could say anti-Semitic,
yeah,
or at least highly critical of Jewish voices and opinions.
yeah.
But I don't know what it is. It's half context here.
I'll just say that they do have some examples here of um oh no, it opened up like the other article. Anyway, there's several examples here of like things that he said, and I'll just say that like I think that like you said, if he's bad, if you basically he basically I think needs a spokesman for social media. Like for him, it's about
Yeah,
the
good luck though,
yeah I know
because he
for
knows best.
because I talked it's like what you said like I want the world to be saved, but I want to be the one to do it basically, and
Yeah, they'll Sam Altman
yeah
confirm it.
like basically my thing is that I was talking to my wife about this when we were going to talk about this a while ago, and I said that for in my opinion when really good leaders realize their weaknesses and kind of hire around it, right? So if he knows he's bad at
Right.
social media, he's like, I got a social media guy. And then if he wants to tweet something, it's like, should I tweet this? And they're like, no, like, do not respond to that. Do not,
Right.
give that
I mean,
person
the
oxygen.
the biggest
Don't.
foot and mouth Twitter people in the world are the two people that need social media managers more than anything in the world. Like someone else to grab their phone and stop them from
Yeah,
pressing send.
yeah.
Donald
There's all the
Trump and Elon Musk.
yeah. There's all those memes of like somebody knocking the phone out of somebody's hand, or whatever, and like something like that
If
where you're
Donald Trump could stop tweeting, right?
yeah,
And stop posting on Truth Social,
that'd be pretty
he'd
great.
probably be far more liked and have a much better chance of the next presidential election.
Yeah, I mean he's doing okay. Biden's not.
I mean,
Yeah,
polling is doing well, but remember, Donald Trump himself was not polling very well, and then suddenly won the nomination in 2016 or
correct,
2015.
correct. Yeah, it's whatever. I mean, so back to Elon. I think
Yeah, yeah,
my I mean the John I sent you the last week tonight video that really just kind of went over everything that we're kind of going over in like broad strokes. And what I like about it at
okay,
the end was John Oliver basically said, "Listen, I'm also conflicted. I think he's what he's done is pretty great, but also like there's these terrible things like him attacking the unions, him,
yeah,
the whole Starlink thing, the fact that you could just turn off communications is bad, the whole anti-Semitic thing, because after the whole anti-Semitic tweet, he went to Israel and it looked like a PR thing of like, I got to make this look good. And, his people came back and said, well, they've been planning it for a while, but then the timing is pretty suspicious. I don't know about any of that, but like, it does look really weird when you say something really bad and it doesn't go down that well. And then, and he also reinstated Alex Jones. And I thought, well,
right. And that's one of the later on things they talk about is bringing back Alex Jones. I mean, and think what you want about Alex Jones, but that definitely doesn't look,
right.
in my
And
opinion.
there's
So the majority of people,
right. I think some of it is for him, for Elon Musk thing is like it's about engagement, right? If Alex Jones is on the platform, maybe there's engagement. So it helps him in the long run if more people are like, what is that crazy crackpot Alex Jones saying? Then people are going to be
the
on the platform.
greatest currency today, and I'm ad-libbing a quote from, oh no, I've spaced his name, but I'm ad-libbing a quote from someone else. I can't remember his name at the moment. The greatest currency in the world is attention.
Yeah, basically. It's true. Like my thing is like with Elon, I try to be a little bit more balanced and everything, but I think it is one of those things where it is this ego of like I can do it. It's like, well, no, you can't. You know what I mean? Like there's certain things you can't do. And even as investors, I didn't bring these articles in, but even as investors are like, hey man, you're running like three companies right now. You got Starlink, you got SpaceX, you got Tesla, and there's
Neuralink.
yeah, you got Neuralink, like all that. Like let someone else do all this stuff, and you worry about one. Like go do like I think in that Ronan Farrow piece they talk about, hey, go do SpaceX, just go do that, hand off Tesla to somebody, you know,
Oh,
um,
and of course X.
yeah, and X, of course. Hand those off to somebody. Let that. She's got a very long, I believe it's a Greek name, Yiannopoulos. She's like the head of the president of Twitter. She's trying to get advertisers to come to X.
Come
And
back, yeah.
yeah, she was actually in the audience when he told everybody to go F themselves, which she was in the front row. I feel really bad for her that day when you're like, well, there's my boss, and then he says that, and you're like, I was
She's
just
trying to run the company and grow the company and make it a better place to work because I mean
yeah,
there's been a lot of revolt from workers. And don't get me wrong, like a lot of people have stayed and I don't think they stayed just because, right, they need a paycheck because those people could go elsewhere. Although right now the tech economy, so maybe I'm wrong
yeah,
on that. But there are people that probably agree with Musk that are inspired by Musk. I'm sure Tesla has hired, or not Tesla, X has hired people that have like wanted to go and work because it's a Musk company because like there's still a lot of people that really admire what he does.
yeah,
But oh man, I would not want to be that gal
yeah.
when he does something like that. You're trying to to grow the company.
Well, the biggest thing that's happened lately, as well as a few days ago. Now it's happened on the right, but this time it happened on the left, where about 4 or 5 left wing accounts, news accounts, got banned one morning. These people woke up and were like, "I'm banned." Then they got unbanned, and Musk said, we're looking into it. The algorithm did a sweep, and apparently, if there was any call to violence, that's why we swept you up and whatever. And I saw an interview with Ken Klippenstein, who's one of the guys that got banned, and he said, look at me. Like, why would I call? He said, why would I call for violence? I don't understand. Uh, it brought me
Hey,
back to the,
those automated tools, if it is an automated tool, are not perfect, right?
yeah,
I work in IT. We have problems with our automated tools all the time, and we have to go back and manually override them,
yeah,
right? Like junk mail filters, I think, are one of the easiest things that people can relate to. Doesn't happen a whole lot anymore, but like junk mail filters are not perfect at identifying this as junk, and they're
right.
also not great at being like, hey, this isn't junk.
Yeah, I will also, the people that are creating the junk mail are getting better at probably circumventing the algorithm. Like if we capitalize this letter or whatever, then the filter
Right. And
won't
so
get
the
it.
point being, right, that whatever code that they had written to do that sweep could have just misidentified something. So it's plausible. It's
Yeah.
a plausible excuse. Or it could be someone was like, I don't like this guy. Bleep.
Yeah, and I mean, again, who knows? Apparently, a very long time ago, when Elon was like when he first started taking over Twitter, apparently somebody showed him a graph of his tweets or whatever, and supposedly he let that person go because Elon was losing engagement, and the person just had just a graph of like, here's your engagement,
Raw data.
and he's like, how dare you? And they're like, but I'm not. I'm just showing you the graph. Like I'm not. I didn't make the graph. I made the graph. I didn't come up with the numbers, but yeah. So
Yeah. Fragile ego.
yeah, it's
I believe it. I mean, I completely believe it. Um, right? Musk was doing great when he wasn't being watched very closely, and can do great when he's not being watched very closely. But now he's under the microscope and he's got a giant bullhorn. Like you said, he owns it, and so it's easy for him to start getting seen.
I mean, I'm
But on
again.
the flip side of it, you've said this before too, though. It's kind of nice because then you actually know where these people stand.
It is. We've talked about this, especially with just in general, but mostly when we talk about episodes, we talk about hate with like, domestic violence and all this. Part of me wants those people to talk because you're like, okay, now I know that account. You know what I mean? Like this person, I don't need to pay attention to them.
Mm-hmm.
Or I know where they are now. Sunlight is the best disinfectant. Like, okay, you've now posted this incredibly anti-Semitic thing. Whoopsie. But now I know that how are you going to come back from this, or what are you going to say now? I think with a lot of people pointed out too, like Musk's upbringing in apartheid South Africa, that would shape one way or another shape how you look at different things. So like
Right.
if he isn't looking at like, and his parents did have money. Apparently, his father owned an emerald mine. I don't want to get into the logistics of all that. I didn't research that. I just have read that before and heard about. The thing is that puts you in a place of privilege or difference with people around you. And then when certain things are coming on, I can imagine if you're already having problems, if you're on the spectrum and you've already lived this life, this certain life, you could be like, well, I don't understand what the problem is. Why don't you guys just do X, Y, and Z? It's the same thing that influencers do all the time about, Kylie Jenner recently got in trouble because her husband or boyfriend, father of her children, partner, basically, he had a private jet, she had a private jet. Somebody posted a picture of both their private jets on either side and them in the middle kissing. And she said, your car or mine. And everybody goes, oh, come on, man, I can't even pay for gas. Like, why are you posting photos of your private jet? So Elon looking at all this stuff kind of around the world going, well, I don't see the problem or whatever. And you're like, bro, like there's something going on here, type thing. So,
Not only does he deal with reading and understanding social cues intuitively. I mean, his biographer actually said this
oh yeah,
really well. Um, so not only does he have those problems, and I'll read this quote in a second, but also as wealthy as he is and how connected he is and the world and life that he lives, right? He's even further removed and disconnected from the average person, so it's hard.
right.
What his biographer wrote talking about thinking it was idiotic for Musk to buy Twitter. And the actual article,
Variety, that Variety article.
it's in Variety. It's written by Todd Spangler. There was no date on the article online.
Yeah, I know.
And the headline is title is Elon Musk biographer Walter Isaacson thought it was idiotic for billionaire to buy Twitter.
Yeah.
All right. So what he said in the article that I thought really stood out, I'm not reading the whole quote, but the part that stood out to me was he doesn't have a fingertip feel for social emotional networks. It's like rocket engines were simpler to him than human emotions.
Ah, yes. Yeah.
Which, right, like, when you already struggle with that, and then you're so far removed from it, and the only people you interact with on a daily basis are essentially reporters and employees.
Yeah.
Like, how do you interpret the world, right? Like everyone, he's in a giant yes man bubble,
Right.
especially with his record of punishing people for disagreeing with him or giving him bad news.
Right. So like the moment you say something bad, you're out. I think that this there's a podcast about Isaacson's whatever they're going over it. Ratliff,
Yeah.
who's doing the podcast, I think this quote's pretty good. He said, Musk at times seems determined to scorch his own legacy by encouraging and even embracing the online hate machine. Ratliff says, anti-Semitism's conspiracy memes or whatever happens. Oh, good, an ad just loaded. Like right when I was reading, it, like popped up. Anyway, anti-Semitism, conspiracy memes, or whatever he happens to post about this week. Musk over the weekend reinstated the X account of radical conspiracy theorist Alex Jones. Side note with Alex Jones, I saw a new debate with him and like 7 other people, and I thought, well, let's see if everything with Sandy Hook calmed Alex Jones down and if he's a different version. No, he's the same. I am a native English speaker, Avin, and when I listen to Alex Jones, it feels like I don't speak English anymore and that he is speaking a language
Okay.
that I don't. I'm like, what is he talking about? What is Alex Jones even saying? And I think for Musk, it's all about engagement. We need Jones on the platform, just like Tucker Carlson. Tucker Carlson is very polarizing, but he has a show on Twitter. That is also another area of contention where people are like, how are you counting views? Because if you're just scrolling by Twitter and spot reading a post, that counts as a view. So like if Tucker Carlson has his show running and you just scroll by it and see, oh, look, it's a Tucker Carlson show and it's on, does that count as a view? Because that's not really you viewing the show. You just see that it is on Twitter. So, and YouTube, I think, has gone into this too. And, being really successful YouTubers like we are having, I have a little bit more of the analytics on the back end and I know how long people look at our videos. In fact, one of the other podcasts I launched, one of my it's a D&D podcast. It's slide aside, but I said, "Oh, we got X amount of views," and he said, "Well, one of those was me," and I said, "Oh, great." And he goes, "I just let it go in the back," and he goes, Then I can't hear myself, so I turned it off." And I was like, "No, you need the anyway." So like, there's been that with Musk about like, how are you calculating views? How are you capturing engagement? Stuff like that. Um, yeah. Oh, Endeavor chief Ariel Emanuel allegedly told Musk he would run Twitter for $100 million, and Musk turned it down. The thing is, Musk overpaid for Twitter to begin with, and it's lost even more
Yep.
value. So that is a
Yep.
big area of contention. I mean, I'm looking at all this. I mean, did this after reading all this, and like you said, you're kind of like you take some pause at some of the things. Did any of this change what you thought about him, or did this just reinforce what you were thinking about him anyway? Like as you were reading these articles and stuff like that. Like,
Um, it brought up some new thoughts, things I hadn't actually thought about before. One, I didn't know. I've always wondered if he had Asperger's.
or
So to find out that he'd actually been diagnosed with it, I
yeah,
probably heard it before at some point. Was just confirming,
right,
and it makes a lot of sense.
a lot, yeah,
Just based off of his behavior and how he interacts. So that gives me a lot more grace for his behavior. It gives me a lot less judgment when he says kind of dumb things online.
right,
Um, the other aspect of it that was eye opening for me was really in that New Yorker article, Pharaoh article. Um, and the eye opening part of that for me was the recognition of like how many different places the government of the United States and world governments rely on Tesla or Musk's businesses
and
to
and literally have to call him personally.
right.
Yeah,
And well, I mean, he's such a public figure, right? Like he is the face of every one of his companies, so it's probably the easiest way to do it, right? If it were another company, they'd probably,
right,
some government relations person or something. But
yeah,
in this case, call Musk because he'll get his hands into any part of how the company runs because that's how he is. So, understanding that, everyone's up in arms about, oh, it has this impact, has this impact, has this impact, and Musk has all this power and control, and my brain isn't going, Musk has all this power and control. My brain is going, well, yeah, because Musk was the one who was willing to take the risk and do it, and now you guys are benefiting from what he's done because you were unable to because of money, because you can't come to an agreement,
well,
or unable to because of fear or public opinions.
right,
Whereas he was willing to go out and take these risks.
yeah. Well, Ronan
Do
Fair,
it yourself, government. Like
yeah,
this is exactly why government needs to do these things so
yeah.
that it's not beholden to these people.
Yeah, Rona Farrow did bring that up in the article. I think it's like the second paragraph or third paragraph where he talks about because our infrastructure has never been a focus of American society until whatever, that this is why this happens is someone could come in and go, well, I could do that for you, but it's a private
Mm-hmm.
individual as opposed to a government agency. And that causes problems with, everything that's doing. I mean, I'm kind of like you where hearing about his, I think some of this stuff is troubling that he's reposted because the anti-Semitic stuff, I think you can only go so far with that. Like the one you're talking
And
about
if you
is
don't know that, right, if you're someone else who's looking, who's an Elon Musk fanboy or someone who's in support of a lot of his viewpoints or ideology, right, if you don't understand where it's coming from in his head, you could read this in a very wrong way and go the wrong way with it.
yeah, but then too you have to be like, man, could you just not like don't just don't hit send. Like I've done that where you're about to send an angry email or something and you delete it, you're like, I don't need to do that, or
Mm-hmm.
maybe you hold your tongue when you're like, I really want to tell this person that I'm really mad, and you just say, you know what, I'm gonna let it be. And I think but then which we may actually have to talk about in an episode because to me there's this line between being a hateful, just a flat out bigoted, hateful person and being like, what's the line of, you know, I've said these things or I've responded to these things, I've liked them, and then I continue to do it, and then I've apologized. It's like, is there a line where you're like, okay, well, this person's obviously a bigoted, terrible person like Richard Spencer, who is an out and out neo-Nazi, as opposed to saying, "Hey, I didn't understand this tweet and I responded to it." My only criticism must be that that Jerusalem post article points out that it has happened a few times. So it isn't just an isolated incident where you can go, I did it one time, he screwed up, my
There's a
bad.
history, but there's a history of the response to it. But is there a deeper understanding of the cultural, societal implications of what he responded to? Right.
Right, yeah.
And the thought would be that Musk has a deep understanding of every single touches,
Yeah.
and you just can't. Right. There's
Yeah.
only so many hours in a day, and while he's shown a propensity to learn, I think it's largely because he's able to dig deep and really hyper focus on stuff.
Yeah.
The other tweet that was actually specifically highlighted in this Jerusalem Post article was Keith Woods posts Alex Jones doesn't want to hashtag ban the ADL because they're the most pro-Hitler organization I've ever seen.
Ugh.
And Elon Musk replies, the ADL, because they are so aggressive in their demands to ban social media accounts or even minor infractions, are, ironically, the biggest generators of anti-Semitism on this platform.
Yeah. Yeah, like, this may be controversial. I understand what Elon's saying, especially if you look at, I mean, the ADL is a lobbying organization. So any lobbying organization is going to have control, just like the NRA, just like any big whatever,
Well, and they have a lot of power.
Yeah.
and they throw around anti-Semitism like crazy. Maybe too much. Maybe they use it heavy-handedly, and it is weakening the actual phrase.
I mean, they just. I mean, I don't know if we talked about it with the Israel Palestine, but there was that bill passed, and I'm not going to say who passed it or who got it through, but several people wanted that they have linked anti-Semitism to anti-Zionism. So if you criticize Zionism, you are basically anti-Semitic. Benjamin Netanyahu has said that. Now I don't know how it's against the law now or whatever, or how that's going to be enforced. But just the fact that they would push that bill through to say we don't like criticism is, I mean, troubling. I mean, that's one of the reasons we did this podcast. You don't always agree with me. Like we could talk about, I'm okay ripping on progressives. If they made a mistake or whatever, just like you're okay with me criticizing conservatives, and you will too if you think that they've made a mistake or screwed up or whatever. So,
right.
I mean, yeah.
And you and I have done that and continue to do that, right?
Yeah.
I think that's a super important thing, like being curious, wanting to learn. So, getting critical of someone for things they've said or done, and then, being able to go back and give them some grace for that behavior is like you were kind of trying to go to, I think, is like where do we draw the line on that? I think that's super, super hard because it's going to be case by case and individual by individual on where we draw that line. Like where is their heart? As you brought up, Musk grew up in apartheid South Africa. So how did it have an impact? He lived with his mom when his parents divorced, and then eventually went to live with his dad. He's discussed about how abusive his father was to him and how hard and terrible it was for him. Right? How does that mark him? And so, with new information, is Musk's opinion going to change and shift? Is he able to and willing to come back and be like, you know what? When I was supporting these people or doing these things, I was probably in the wrong. I didn't have a full, deep understanding of it. Now that I have more understanding of it, and I've talked to people who were impacted by it, I suddenly realize, like, oh yeah, I probably shouldn't have said that. Because I read this tweet that they're calling out as a terrible thing, and I read his response of the Anti-Defamation League, because they are so aggressive in their demand to ban social media accounts for even minor infractions, are ironically the biggest generators of anti-Semitism on this platform. And from what I read in that, maybe I'm wrong, please correct me. What I read in that is because the ADL is so aggressive at banning accounts, they then get other people against their viewpoints because they're angry at the ADL for the actions that they took.
I mean,
and so
I could see
they're actually driving people the other way.
I mean, it makes sense in my brain that if people know anything about the ADL and if they are in fact a Israeli or Jewish organization or lobbying group, the moment there's any criticism, you'd be like, oh yeah, like if you were conspiracy brained or anti-Semitic, you could say, oh, I understand why this is happening, or you could just look at it and say, they are lobbying. They are lobbying. That's their job, is to lobby for whatever cause they, and the ADL is made up of tons of people from probably a lot of different religious, racial, whatever backgrounds. But yeah, I mean, if your brain is broken and you believe in conspiracy theories and you're anti-Semitic or whatever, I could see you reading that going, "Oh, I see what's going on." It's like, all right, man, well, calm down. Again, hey, tweet all your stuff out or X it out or whatever they call it because I want to know your account so I can
Right.
unfollow you or block you so I know exactly.
And one of the things that they highlighted later on in this was kind of that same idea that you just hinted at too of where is it? Where is it? Where is it? Musk had said something along the lines in an interview with NBC reporter Ben Collins in May of 2008. Musk wrote, "Who do you think owns the press?" This statement was viewed by many as perpetuating an anti-Semitic stereotype. Although Musk dismissed such accusations as inner bigotry, but kind of that belief that like, oh, the Jews own Hollywood, the Jews own the press,
Yeah.
like that sort of um, commonly held anti-Jew.
That's like a classic. That's like a classic
Yeah,
conspiracy
been around
anti-Semitic.
forever.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so right, like those kind of things definitely lean you into thinking that, but also where does it come from? Should he perpetuate it? No. Is he anti-Semitic? I mean, the evidence is there. Maybe you dig a little bit more deeply in it.
Yeah, that's
Um,
something I think we will have to do an episode about that because there's people that I immediately write off where I think I brought it up with Harlan Crow, that donator he's a rich whatever he donated to Clarence Thomas on the Supreme Court. Like gave him gifts. He has a lot of Nazi memorabilia, and apparently he displays
yeah,
it in
yeah,
his house. Now, here's the
yeah.
deal. I don't think you and I got in a fight, but I was like, what's the line between the amount of Nazi memorabilia you have and displaying it between going, this is interesting historical stuff, or going like, you might think the Nazis had a point, like that kind of like,
Right,
what is the
right.
line, And I think what I read in the articles when they were talking about this guy, when these investigations came out with Clarence Thomas was people were shocked where they'd go over to his house for dinner and it was like not maybe in the front room but like you would see it on the way to the dining room, meaning you would display it in a way of like normal people just wanting to come over for dinner, maybe not knowing that much about you, hearing that
Hanging
you're
it in
what.
the hallways and the entryway.
Yeah, you're like,
Right.
whoa, 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 what's going on here, what's going on with that.
Got a
I
hutch with a bunch of Nazi plates or
Yeah, he had
China.
plates. Apparently he had a signed copy of Mein Kampf apparently, which is again, I don't know. Anyway, is there anything, since we're wrapping up, is there anything you want to plug before we leave?
As always, my YouTube channel, Your Agent Guide. It's not incredibly active lately, but there is still very useful information there.
I still get stuff on
Um,
Facebook of,
I do post just like real estate news and updates and kind of pointers and stuff on Facebook and Instagram. But I haven't made any videos on my YouTube channel in a while,
I
which is
see.
was what I was getting at. Actually, it's been over a year now, but
Ooh.
some of the information there is still useful and valuable.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that. Occasionally, I'm a guest on your other podcast,
Mm-hmm.
which you will
Mm-hmm.
now plug.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Gaming with Grief. Go there. We're for the new year. I'm going to do clips of that show, so there'll be smaller, bite-sized things, which I was going to announce too. I'm going to try to do clips with this show as well, because sometimes I've said it before, but when I look at online content, sometimes I will watch a clip of people doing exactly what we were doing, and then decide to either watch the full video or subscribe or both things or whatever. I'm going to try to do that this year with this podcast, so you'll get more bite-sized stuff out there. And I'll try to keep the releases, consistent. But I'm just trying to work out a way to push us out a little bit better, because like I noticed, we don't have clips. I don't have clips for the other show, Game with Grief, or this show. And I understand this is a long form content thing. And if people don't know us, they don't want to sit down and watch an hour long video. Maybe they want to hear that Avin had a good point, or I had a good point, or both of us had a good point. Watch that, and then go to the show and decide to watch the whole thing. Like, subscribe, all that kind of stuff. And at the start of the year, I did a D&D podcast. So I started that with some friends. You may see Avin on there doing a one shot or something like that. He doesn't have the time to do the full campaign. I get it. Also, we got some views for that too. So yeah, like all that stuff is coming up in the new year. It's been 3 years, man. That's pretty crazy that we've been doing this 3 years. Even though we do once a month, I think it's pretty. In fact, there was some issues we wanted to talk about today, but they're ongoing literal court cases that we're waiting to see. Since we only post once a month, we're waiting to see the results of that. One of them
Yeah.
is the Trump thing with the ballot access. I am very fascinated to see how that works out because I've seen people pro, some people con.
I mean, this week we had the second appeals court hear the immunity
Right,
challenge.
right.
We're waiting for an answer back on that one.
Yeah, then the with Israel and Palestine, obviously there's been a lot more development. South Africa has brought up genocide charges against Israel. It's going to the International Court. They had opening arguments as a recording, I believe, yesterday, if I got my date right. I got really excited because I've been sick and I've been sleeping a lot, so I got up at a weird time and they said live coverage of the trial, and I was like, oh, I'm going to click on this because I can't sleep because I'm a nerd. So I clicked on it, and it was just everybody's car pulling into the international court. So apparently somebody just put a live camera on the feed and just said they're gonna get here eventually. But we want to talk about that because it is a big deal, and I think South Africa being the one to bring the case against Israel is actually very fascinating. They even, I think, in their opening statement said that we know very uniquely some of these charges and how they can affect a country, basically. So I think that's fascinating. And we just want to do an update with Israel and Palestine because the conflict did not end. It has not ended.
Yeah,
It's still
it's
going
still
on.
going.
It's still going on. So I think with that, we will say goodbye. Everybody have a good month, and we will talk to everybody next month.